What if everything you've been taught about creating your future is backwards? What if instead of chasing the timeline you want, you could step directly into the timeline you belong in? There's a quantum principle that explains why you feel stuck between who you are and who you're meant to become, and why all your goal setting and manifesting techniques have only brought you closer to the life you're trying to escape. The moment you understand what quantum alignment actually means, you're not trying to create a better version of your current reality. You're stepping into a completely different timeline where that better version of you already exists. Everything changes. Here's what's shocking about this discovery. Right now, in this very moment, there are infinite versions of your life playing out simultaneously across parallel timelines. There's a version of you who made that bold career change 5 years ago and is living your dream life. There's a version who had the courage to leave that toxic relationship and found true love. There's a version who trusted their intuition about that investment and achieved financial freedom. But most people spend their entire lives trying to build these realities from scratch instead of aligning with the timeline where they already exist. They're trapped in what I call timeline resistance. They keep trying to force their current circumstances to change while remaining energetically aligned with the very patterns that created those circumstances in the first place. They set goals from a place of lack, take action from a place of desperation, and wonder why they keep recreating the same limitations in slightly different packaging. But there's a quantum principle that changes everything. When you understand that alignment isn't about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you already are in your highest timeline, you can stop fighting your way toward your dreams and start stepping directly into them. I'm going to show you the exact 4-step quantum alignment protocol that shifts you from trying to create your ideal life to actually living it. Plus, I'll give you the timeline jumping technique that makes this transition automatic in just minutes. So you become someone who doesn't chase opportunities but magnetizes them, who doesn't struggle toward success but flows into it naturally. Every moment you spend misaligned with your highest timeline is a moment you're volunteering to live below your potential. And most people waste entire lifetimes never realizing they had a choice. When you were conceived, you didn't think your way into existence. You aligned. Your soul chose this lifetime, this body, this moment in history not randomly, but as the perfect vehicle for expressing your unique frequency in physical form. Your very first moment of consciousness wasn't a decision or a plan. It was a quantum alignment with the timeline that would give you the greatest opportunity for growth, service, and joy. In that moment of conception, you knew something that you've since forgotten. Alignment is not about becoming worthy of what you desire. It's about remembering that you're already worthy of what desires you. But somewhere along the way, we learn to live like we're separate from our dreams instead of like the natural inheritors of them. We began operating from scarcity rather than from sovereignty. Take a moment right now and think about something you deeply desire. Maybe it's a career that excites you, a relationship that fulfills you, or a level of financial freedom that gives you peace. Now notice what happens in your body when you imagine having it. If you're like most people, there's probably a subtle contraction, a voice that whispers, "But that's not realistic for someone like me," or "I don't know how to make that happen." This is timeline resistance. The part of you that's still energetically committed to the story of limitation. Ancient quantum physicists, though they wouldn't have called themselves that, understood something we've forgotten in our modern world. From the Hermetic principle of correspondence, as above, so below, to the Buddhist understanding of interdependent origination, wisdom traditions across time recognize that reality exists as an infinite web of possibilities, and consciousness is what determines which possibility we experience. They knew that what we call manifestation isn't about creating something from nothing. It's about aligning with the timeline where what we desire already exists in fullness. In these traditions, quantum alignment wasn't just a concept. It was a way of life. The ancient Egyptians taught that each soul carried within it the blueprint of its highest expression, what they called the Ka. The Vedic sages discovered that consciousness could shift not just your inner experience, but the very timeline you're living in. They weren't speaking philosophically. They understood that when you align with your highest frequency, you're not just changing your perspective on reality. You're literally shifting into a different version of reality itself. Think about this. Every major breakthrough you've ever had, every moment of clarity or sudden opportunity, every time something wonderful happened that you couldn't have planned, was actually a moment of spontaneous alignment with a higher timeline. When you were anxious and forcing, you were locked into timelines of struggle. When you were at peace and trusting, you naturally shifted into timelines of flow. Your alignment isn't just reflecting your reality, it's selecting it from the infinite field of possibilities that exist in every moment. The difference between timeline resistance and quantum alignment is consciousness. Timeline resistance happens when you're unconsciously committed to old stories. Quantum alignment happens when you consciously choose which version of reality you want to inhabit. When you begin to align with intention, with presence, with reverence for the magnificent being you already are in your highest timeline, something magical begins to happen. You stop being someone who hopes their dreams might come true someday and you become someone who steps into the timeline where they're already living those dreams. This is where alignment becomes quantum. Because every moment of conscious alignment is no longer just improving your current situation. It's shifting you into an entirely different stream of possibilities. What I'm about to reveal will shatter the illusion you've been living under. You think you're stuck in one fixed reality, but you're actually dancing between infinite possibilities every single second. Most of us spend our entire lives believing we have only one timeline, one fixed set of circumstances we have to work with. We wake up in the morning and immediately start thinking about our problems, our limitations, our history of what hasn't worked. We assume this current version of reality is the only one available to us. But what if I told you that's not how the quantum field actually works? Right now, as you're reading this, I want you to do something simple. Imagine the version of you who is already living your dream life. Don't think about how to get there. Just imagine them. What do they feel like when they wake up in the morning? How do they carry themselves through the day? What's the quality of their energy, their confidence, their inner peace? As you do this, something remarkable is happening. You're not just fantasizing. You're actually tuning into a parallel timeline where that version of you is completely real and completely accessible. Now, while you're connecting with this highest version of yourself, notice what your current mind is doing. It might be protesting, but I don't have the money for that, or I don't have the skills for that, or people like me don't get to live like that. Here's the beautiful revelation. If you can observe those limiting thoughts, if you can witness them arising and passing away, then you are not those thoughts. You are the consciousness that can choose which thoughts to align with and which timelines to step into. This is the birth of the timeline jumper. The part of you that exists beyond any single version of your life story. Think of it like standing in a vast library with infinite books. Your limiting thoughts are like focusing on one book titled, Why My Life is Hard, and believing that's the only book available to you. But you, the real you, are the reader who can choose any book in the library. Some books tell stories of struggle and limitation. Others tell stories of abundance and joy. But notice this. The library itself, the consciousness that perceives all possibilities, is never limited by any single story. In quantum physics, they call this the observer effect. The consciousness that observes literally determines which possibility becomes reality. This observer consciousness is your true nature. The part of you that has access to every timeline simultaneously. It's the part that can witness your current circumstances without being imprisoned by them. Your ego mind, that voice that never stops narrating your limitations, wants you to believe this timeline is all there is. It creates elaborate justifications for why you can't have what you want, why other people got lucky but you didn't, why change is hard and dreams are for other people. It lives in constant commentary about past failures and future fears. But the timeline jumper lives only in this moment of infinite possibility where every dream is equally available. When you begin to identify more with the timeline jumper and less with the story of limitation, something profound shifts. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become a conscious selector of experiences. Instead of being trapped by your history, you can observe it, learn from it, and choose a different future. Instead of being defined by your current conditions, you can acknowledge them while aligning with the timeline where those conditions have already transformed. This is where your real freedom begins. Quantum alignment becomes your bridge to this timeline jumper consciousness. Every time you align with your highest frequency, you're not just improving this timeline. You're stepping into a better one. You're moving from being the character trapped in one story to being the author who can write any story they choose. This isn't just a spiritual concept. This is quantum mechanics in action. The many worlds interpretation of quantum physics tells us that every possible version of reality exists simultaneously. When you become the conscious selector of which reality you experience, you gain the power to literally live in a different world while others remain stuck in their old patterns. Have you ever had a moment where your entire life seemed to shift in an instant? Maybe it was meeting someone who changed everything, or getting an opportunity that seemed to come from nowhere, or having a realization that transformed how you see yourself. Hidden in those moments of spontaneous transformation is the secret of how timeline jumping actually works. But 99% of people think those moments were accidents instead of learning how to create them on command. Those moments when everything shifted that you just remembered, they weren't coincidences. They were glimpses of what becomes possible when you slip into quantum alignment with your highest timeline. In that suspended moment of transformation, you touched something beyond the ordinary rules of cause and effect. You discovered timeline jumping. Think about the moment just before one of those major shifts happened. If you examine it closely, you'll notice something interesting. There was usually a moment of surrender, a releasing of how you thought things had to be, a willingness to let something new emerge. That wasn't giving up. That was quantum alignment. In that moment of release, you stopped holding yourself in the old timeline and allowed yourself to shift into a new one. Take a moment right now and imagine you could step into any timeline you choose. Not gradually, not over years of effort, but right now. What would that feel like? There's a specific quality of energy, a particular frequency that exists in your highest timeline. It's not desperate or grasping. It's not trying to prove anything or impress anyone. It's simply the natural state of a being who knows they belong exactly where they want to be. Ancient mystery schools understood this secret. In the temples of Delphi, students were taught to access what they called the eternal moment, the space where all possibilities existed simultaneously. They called it entering the chamber of becoming, the sacred space where choice determines experience. These weren't just meditation techniques. They were training in timeline navigation. The Greeks knew what quantum physics is now proving. In the space between one reality and another, in the gap between what was and what could be, consciousness has the power to select which possibility becomes experience. It's like the moment between radio stations when you're tuning the dial. For a brief instant, you're not locked into any single frequency. In that moment, you can choose which station to tune into. Your consciousness creates the same sacred possibility in every moment. In this quantum gap, something remarkable happens. Your usual identity falls away. The story of who you've been and what you can't do goes quiet. And in that silence, your highest timeline becomes not just visible but accessible. Not the desperate wanting of someone trying to escape their life, but the clear knowing of someone stepping into their rightful place. Think of this gap as the birthing place of new realities. Just as a butterfly must dissolve completely in the cocoon before emerging in its new form, you must be willing to dissolve your attachment to the current timeline to step into a higher one. The ancient mystics called it the eye of the needle. That impossibly small opening through which infinite possibilities must pass to become your lived reality. Most people rush past these moments. They're so attached to their current identity, so invested in their story of struggle, that they miss the constant invitations to step into something greater. But when you learn to recognize the gap, when you can be comfortable in the space between who you've been and who you're becoming, you discover that this is where all quantum leaps happen. It's not about forcing yourself to change or trying to become someone different. It's about learning to be present with the natural evolution of your consciousness. And in that presence, touching the place where your highest self is not a future possibility but a present reality waiting to be claimed. In the quantum gap, you're not trying to create a new timeline. You're recognizing the timeline you already belong in. But accessing this quantum gap is only the beginning. There's something deeper that needs to be activated before you can sustainably live in your highest timeline. Your body has been calibrated to your old reality, and those old calibrations are literally blocking your ability to step into the new one. That deeper activation I mentioned isn't found by thinking your way to a higher timeline or visualizing your ideal life. It's discovered by recalibrating your entire nervous system to match the frequency of the timeline you want to inhabit. Just as ancient temples were designed to hold and amplify sacred energy, your body must be recalibrated to hold and embody the frequency of your highest timeline. Think about the great energy structures of the world, the pyramids of Giza that still resonate with mathematical precision, the stone circles that align with celestial forces, the sacred sites where people report spontaneous healings and profound realizations. These weren't built randomly. Every measurement was calculated to create resonance with higher frequencies, to serve as portals between ordinary reality and expanded possibility. Your body is no different. It's already designed to be a resonant chamber for your highest timeline, but most of us have never learned to tune it properly. The ancient Egyptians understood this profoundly. They recognized the human body as a sophisticated instrument capable of resonating with any frequency of reality. They knew that timeline jumping wasn't just a mental process but a full-body recalibration. They developed elaborate practices to align every cell, every energy center, every breath with the frequency of their desired reality. As you begin to align more consciously with your highest timeline, you might notice something interesting happening. Certain old patterns may feel uncomfortable in ways they never did before. That job that used to feel tolerable might suddenly feel suffocating. That relationship that was fine might reveal itself as deeply misaligned. That living situation you settled for might feel like it's holding you back. These aren't problems. They're recalibration signals. Your body is becoming sensitive to frequencies that don't match your highest timeline. That restlessness you feel isn't dissatisfaction with your life. It's your nervous system updating to match the reality you're moving into. But here's the beautiful thing about conscious recalibration. It doesn't just reveal what's misaligned, it naturally guides you toward what's in alignment. Each conscious choice to honor your highest frequency is like tuning a cosmic instrument, adjusting your entire being to resonate with the timeline where you thrive. Imagine your nervous system as a sophisticated radio that's been tuned to a static-filled station. No matter how much you want to hear beautiful music, you're going to keep getting interference because you're tuned to the wrong frequency. Timeline recalibration is like cleaning the signal and tuning to the station where your favorite song is playing clearly. Each old trigger that gets healed, each limiting pattern that gets released, each moment you choose love over fear is another adjustment that brings you into perfect resonance with your highest timeline. The Egyptians built their pyramids to channel cosmic energies into earthly form. Through conscious recalibration, you're doing the same thing with your body. You're aligning your entire system with the higher frequencies of the timeline you belong in. This isn't about perfecting yourself or forcing transformation. It's about remembering the natural frequency of your being and allowing everything that's not in harmony with that frequency to naturally fall away. Once your nervous system is recalibrated, something remarkable begins to happen to everything around you. Science has proven that you emit an electromagnetic signature that others can feel up to 8 feet away, which means you're constantly broadcasting which timeline you're aligned with to everyone around you. That remarkable thing that begins to happen around you once you're recalibrated isn't just energetic theory. It's measurable physics. Research in bioelectromagnetics has shown that your heart and nervous system generate electromagnetic fields that extend far beyond your physical body. And these fields change dramatically based on which timeline you're aligned with. When you're aligned with timelines of struggle, limitation, and fear, your field broadcasts that frequency to everyone within its reach. But when you're aligned with your highest timeline, your field becomes a transmission of possibility that others can actually feel. Think of your electromagnetic signature like a radio tower. When you're aligned with lower timelines, you're broadcasting a signal that says, life is hard, opportunities are scarce, I have to struggle to get what I need. When you're aligned with your highest timeline, you're broadcasting, life is abundant, possibilities are everywhere, I naturally attract what's meant for me. Everyone around you is unconsciously tuning into whichever signal you're transmitting. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to effortlessly attract opportunities, supportive relationships, and synchronistic events, while others work just as hard but seem to encounter obstacles everywhere? This isn't about luck or privilege, though those can play a role. It's about timeline alignment. The people who naturally magnetize good things are unconsciously aligned with timelines where good things flow easily. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt either inspired or drained without anyone saying a word? Have you ever noticed how certain people seem to carry possibility with them wherever they go, while others seem to carry limitation? This isn't imagination. It's timeline broadcasting in action. We're constantly transmitting which version of reality we're aligned with through our electromagnetic signature. And others are receiving these signals whether they realize it or not. Children are especially sensitive to these frequencies. They haven't yet learned to override their natural intuition, so they respond immediately to the timeline signature we're broadcasting. When a parent is aligned with timelines of stress and scarcity, children often become anxious or rebellious without understanding why. But when that same parent shifts into alignment with their highest timeline, children often naturally become more peaceful and cooperative because they're now receiving a signal of safety and possibility. This field effect extends to every interaction you have. When you walk into job interviews aligned with your highest timeline, you're not just presenting your qualifications. You're creating an electromagnetic environment that makes it easy for others to see your value. When you enter relationships from this alignment, you're not looking for someone to complete you. You're offering the gift of being around someone who's aligned with their highest expression. The beautiful thing about understanding your timeline signature is that it shows you how connected we all really are. You're not just an isolated individual trying to improve your own life. You're part of a vast field of consciousness, and every moment you spend aligned with your highest timeline contributes to the overall frequency of possibility available to everyone. But this influence isn't something you need to think about or manage. It happens naturally when you focus on maintaining your own alignment. The field responds to authenticity, not performance. When you're genuinely living in alignment with your highest timeline, that authenticity broadcasts naturally without any effort on your part. This is why the ancient teachings often spoke of the awakened person as someone who serves simply by being. They understood that consciousness itself is contagious, that alignment is magnetic, and that one person living fully in their highest timeline can shift the possibilities available to everyone around them. You've traveled far without ever moving from where you sit. Not through space, but through dimensions of possibility, through layers of who you're capable of being. The most successful timeline jumpers in history mastered one thing you've never been taught: how to access infinite possibility through perfect alignment with what already is. And in that traveling through dimensions of yourself, you've discovered something the ordinary world doesn't want you to know. The most powerful thing you can do is often to stop trying so hard and start allowing what wants to emerge through you. We live in a culture that worships effort, that tells us more action equals more results, that keeps us constantly pushing toward future goals while missing the perfection that's available in this moment. But the quantum field, the field that contains every possible timeline, operates by completely different principles. The field doesn't respond to how hard you try. It responds to how aligned you are. It doesn't care about your productivity or your 5-year plan. It cares about your frequency, your resonance, your willingness to embody the timeline you belong in right now. And the most magnetic alignment of all is presence. Not the presence of someone who's given up on their dreams, but the dynamic presence of someone who knows their dreams are not somewhere in the future but available in this eternal moment of infinite possibility. Think about a mountain lake for a moment. It appears completely still, yet it perfectly reflects whatever is placed before it. It doesn't struggle to create the reflection. It doesn't chase after images to capture. It simply maintains its natural clarity, and the reflection appears effortlessly. This is the kind of presence that attracts entire new timelines. When you learn to align with this quality of magnetic presence, something extraordinary happens. Reality begins to rearrange itself around your frequency instead of requiring you to chase after what you want. Opportunities that you could never have forced begin to appear naturally. People who can help you seem to cross your path at exactly the right moment. Solutions to problems you've been struggling with suddenly become obvious. This isn't magic. It's quantum physics. When you're in a state of aligned presence, you're no longer broadcasting the chaotic signals of desperation, control, or struggle. Instead, you're emanating the clear frequency of someone who belongs in their highest timeline. The field responds to this clarity by organizing circumstances to match your frequency. Consider the center of a spiral galaxy. All around it, billions of stars orbit in perfect harmony, creating breathtaking beauty and cosmic order. But at the very center is what appears to be stillness, a gravitational presence so powerful it organizes everything around it. From that center of aligned stillness, entire worlds are held in their perfect orbits. This is the kind of presence you can cultivate within yourself. Not the presence of someone who has given up on growth, but the presence of someone who has learned to be the gravitational center of their own life experience. The difference between forcing and allowing becomes crystal clear in this presence. Forcing tries to manipulate external circumstances to match internal desires. Allowing maintains such perfect alignment with your highest timeline that external circumstances naturally reorganize to match that frequency. Forcing is exhausting because you're fighting against the natural intelligence of the universe. Allowing is effortless because you're cooperating with it. When you align consciously, when you rest in the quantum gap, when you recalibrate your nervous system to match your highest timeline, you're not trying to make things happen. You're allowing the natural unfolding of what wants to happen through you. You become a clear channel for the intelligence of your highest timeline to express itself as your lived experience. This doesn't mean becoming passive or lazy. True presence is incredibly alive, incredibly aware. It's the presence of a master archer just before releasing the arrow. Completely focused, completely aligned, completely ready for whatever wants to emerge. From this place, your actions become effortless and incredibly effective because they're arising from alignment rather than effort, from presence rather than pushing. Now, as you prepare to step fully into the timeline you belong in, take this frequency with you. And now you return not to who you were, but to who you've always been in your highest expression. Beneath the stories of limitation, the alignment brought you here. And now it reveals the final truth. You were never separate from the timeline you desire. You were never unworthy of the life that calls to you. You were simply temporarily aligned with a lower frequency version of your infinite possibilities. Presence is not the absence of ambition. Presence is ambition aligned with truth. You've journeyed through the quantum nature of reality, discovering that what you call your life is actually one selection from infinite parallel possibilities available in every moment. You've awakened the timeline jumper within, that eternal part of you that can observe all possibilities while choosing which ones to experience. In the quantum gap between realities, you found the sacred space where consciousness selects experience, where choice determines which possibility becomes your lived reality. Through recalibrating your nervous system, you've learned that your body is not just flesh and bone, but a sophisticated instrument that can tune to any timeline frequency you choose. You've discovered that your electromagnetic signature extends far beyond your physical form, making you a constant broadcaster of whichever timeline you're aligned with to everyone you encounter. And finally, you've touched the profound truth that the most powerful action is often perfect presence. The dynamic stillness that allows your highest timeline to live itself through you rather than forcing your way toward what you think you want. There will be moments when old patterns pull you toward lower timelines. When fear whispers that you can't have what you want, when circumstances seem to prove that change is impossible, when the gap between where you are and where you want to be feels too wide to cross. In those moments, remember the shortest path to your highest timeline is presence. 3 conscious breaths can bring you back to the timeline jumper perspective. One moment in the quantum gap can reconnect you to infinite possibility. A single choice to align with your highest frequency can shift you into an entirely different stream of experience. This isn't about perfection. It's about remembering that you always have a choice about which timeline to inhabit. Each time you remember to choose alignment over resistance, presence over forcing, possibility over limitation, you're not just improving your current experience. You're stepping into the timeline where that choice has already created everything you desire. You're becoming a living demonstration that consciousness, not circumstances, determines which reality you experience. Now, as you step forward into this moment and every moment that follows, carry this knowing with you. Let your alignment be your compass. Let presence be your power. Let the frequency of your highest timeline move through you in every word, every choice, every breath. So align. Not to escape who you are, but to remember who you are. Not to create a better future, but to claim the perfect present. Not to become worthy, but to embody the worthiness that has always been yours. The timeline is ready. You are the key. Step through.